What happens when a Las Vegas Reformed Jewish rabbi and a Las Vegas Presbyterian pastor have a conversation as friends? They discover that no matter where you live or what you believe, faith matters. In this episode of Faith Matters, Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian from Green Valley Presbyterian Church talk about the Henderson Temple's Hesed Drive for Los Angeles wildfire crisis relief and how temple members prayed with their feet when raising more than 75,000 pounds of donations for those in need in Los Angeles.
Adrian, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year. Here we are. It's already January.
I can't believe it. It's been way too long since we've been able to record a podcast.
What happened? The end of the year just gets so crazy, and here we are. I say it's January. It's actually almost the end of January as we speak.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. What year are we? Oh, we're in 2025.
No, I still keep writing 24. Whoops, I got to change that, right?
That's right. Well,
but you have been busy yourself in a good way at congregation near Tamid. And, maybe we better say for the listener that we are talking in response in the ongoing aftermath of the wildfires in Southern California. And we all know those continue, but you and your congregation have been involved in a really important work, and that was raising supplies to help those in need, those who've been affected. And I know our audience would love to hear about this.
I appreciate it. I'll kind of start at the beginnings, if you will. There's multiple beginnings of this project. The first is all of us, I'm sure, are looking at the television and we're seeing what's going on, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And because we're in Las Vegas, many people have friends or family in Southern California. It could be a suburb of Las Vegas. And so our hearts go out to those who were impacted, who continue to be impacted, and our prayers go out for their safety. So we're looking at this and thinking to ourselves, well, what can we do besides prayer? Or maybe send some money and identify a charity or two. And there was a Jewish philosopher named Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was really involved in the civil rights movement. And he coined a phrase that we have to pray, but we have to pray with our feet. And he said that as a way of encouraging the March on Selma. But it became kind of a slogan as a call to action. And
this was Abraham
Joshua Heschel. Abraham Joshua Heschel,
yes.
In the 1960s. So it was like, I think it's time to pray with my feet here. And it was a joint project between me and my cantor, Jessica Hutchings. And she happened to be at a convention in Palm Springs. And she started hearing cries and tears and all kinds of sad things of clergy who were in for this convention and calling home and finding out that their homes were destroyed or their congregations were impacted. In fact, one synagogue lost 200 families lost their homes, and 3 of the rabbis lost their home in Pacific Palisades. Horrible, horrible, affected people of all faiths. So when Cantor came back from convention on that Wednesday, we were talking about we got to do something. So what do? I don't know. We collect gift cards. That's pretty simple. And then we got to thinking about it, and we wanted to do something a little bit more impactful. And I remembered when Katrina hit, there was a fellow, Gary Boardman, who called me up and said, Rabbi, we need to do something. And he had access to trucks and drivers. So I called Gary. I by coincidence, I saw him within the last year, but before that, it had been many years. So it was almost like God put him back in my life. And I said, Gary, do you remember Katrina? He said, yeah, that was a good thing we did. And I said, well, Los Angeles is next. He said, I'm with you, Rabbi. And with his simple statement of I'm with you, Rabbi, that changed everything, because It meant that there was another person who wanted to do something, who was going to take care of one worry, which was the truck, the driver, the fuel.
Mm.
Not that I couldn't have figured it out, but then I'm like, oh, well, I got to come up with, a couple thousand, 3,000 just to start. Now I could just get started. And I said, well, what if we collect too much? He says, I'll find you another truck. We were going to start with a truck about 14 feet, and we ended up with 3 trucks, 24 feet, 75,000 pounds of supplies, and 6,000 in gift cards. Because as the media heard about it, they encouraged people to just drop stuff off. We had a specific list, and they just started dropping stuff off. And a lot of people just could do the gift cards, which is much more fungible. So there you had it. Now the question is, when are you going to do it again? When are you going to do? Let me tell you, it took a lot of volunteers and a lot of effort.
Many.
And it's one of those things. I could have planned it over a couple weeks, and instead we planned it over a weekend, and couldn't have gone better. Couldn't have gone better.
But the reality for me is, as I say thank you on behalf of those in Southern California and those here in the Las Vegas Valley, is it shows us that as people of the Abrahamic faith, as Jews and Christians, we believe that God not only calls us to pray, but God calls us to take action to do something, because we are agents for change. We're agents for good. That's what you believe. That's what we believe. It's inherent within the Jewish scriptures, the Christian scriptures. And I think so often, maybe that's where we can receive criticism as people of faith, is when we say, well, you're in our prayers, and yet the public is looking to us to say, but what are you going to do about it? And we believe that prayer is the most important thing we can do. At least I do. But I also believe that prayer is this starting point in which God motivates me to go out there and also be an agent for change, to be an agent for good.
There's a story that's told in our tradition about a man who's drowning, and he's praying to God to save him. And so while he's waiting for his prayers to be answered, the Coast Guard pulls up, and
Yes.
he says, no, go away, I'm waiting for God to save me. So the Coast Guard leaves, and a fisherman comes by, he shoos him away, he's waiting for God to do a miracle. And eventually the guy just drowns, goes to heaven. He says, God, why didn't you save me? He said, I sent the Coast Guard, I sent a fisherman, what more do you want? And
right.
it's we are God's agents, and not in a way that or can be arrogant. All of us, I told my congregation, I said, all of us can be what I call mitzvah angels. In the more narrow sense, it means following in God's commandments. But if someone's, quote, a mitzvah angel, it just is a colloquial way of saying you were an agent to be there as God's emissary to do good in the world. And I think that's what our community felt when we were able to help Los Angeles. A lot more could be done, should be done, but because these volunteers just showed up in our social hall. What can I do? What can I do? And they were schlepping waters and clothing. They were sorting, and it just, where'd you come from? We heard about it, so we came. It was almost like a little fantasy movie, if you will, where people.
Well, I know when people said, is there a drop-off site? I was able to say, go to congregation near Tamid.
Yeah.
Here, what I was impressed with, if I can talk briefly about our congregation, because we didn't do anything as big as that. But when we put the appeal out there and we said we were going to support Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, which is a relief agency, the money came in. And within 1 week, we raised over $11,000. For a congregation like ours, that's really significant.
Yes.
Now, will we continue to do something in the days ahead? We're going to continue to collect money. But as you say, it's a neighbor, right? It's a neighboring state. The connections between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, they're just integral. And there's so many relationships, families intertwined. And I suspect that there will be mission trips as Presbyterians we're going to take part of. There will probably be mission trips that you will take part of as, a congregation at Ner Tamid. But I believe this is really what speaks to us as people of faith, that God not only calls us to prayer, but one of the ways that we worship God, and I think we forget about that, is like you said, this mitzvah, it is an act of worship when we do good for others.
So there's another term in our tradition. It's called lahit palel. And you're studying Hebrew.
And I don't know what lahit palel means, so you
So the
have to
first
help.
thing is when you do the conjugations, you'll know it is
Lamed,
it is in
hey.
hifel, right? So
Okay,
it's the seventh conjugation, which means it's reflexive.
okay,
So the verb is one that reflects back on the person. And so it means
yes.
when you say to pray, it's lahit palel. So when you pray and you use that Hebrew term to pray, that means it reflects back on you. It's a judgment of yourself.
Mm,
And you look in the mirror and say, what have I done? What is my responsibility? How do I partner with God? And that is a definition of prayer. A definition. There's many,
many
but
definitions.
but that's one of them. And I think it's important because sometimes when something tragic happens, it could be, one of those mass shootings, heaven
Mm,
forbid, or whatever, thoughts and prayers. And now it's happened so much that it just sounds like a cliche. And there has to be a point, and doesn't have to be guns. It could be anything that we feel is an injustice, where we say, enough. I need to be able to look myself in the mirror and say, I did something. I
right.
changed the world. And if we focus about changing the whole world, we're not going to get too far. It's too much. So try our home, try our children, try our neighborhood, try our church or synagogue or mosque. Make make some noise, and find a way to make a difference. I think
And
that's what
you're
this
you're a
Los
Bible
Angeles.
scholar, and you know this, but I love when the Jewish people are in exile. And in Isaiah, we read these words, seek the welfare of the city, right? That
Yes.
sense of no matter where you are, you seek the welfare of the inhabitants around you. And for us, as we said, California is our next door neighbor. They're around us.
Well,
There's
you quoted the Bible. I'm going to quote another scholar. You want me to wait? You got a thought coming.
no, I just wanted to say this if I could, and that is Jerome, who you may not know of, but Jerome translates the Bible into the Latin, and a very influential scholar in Christianity. And Jerome says, when we do justice, we become fully alive. I love that.
That is beautiful. So this is like a scholar from the medieval period or more recent.
No, no, earlier than that.
Oh,
Earlier than
okay.
that.
So
So he's taking the scriptures and he's translating them into the Latin Vulgate. I'm not sure when the Latin Vulgate was. Maybe you remember. We could look it up. Audience, there's a little challenge for you.
that's
Find
right.
out the date of the Latin Vulgate. Yes.
Well, I was going to go for someone more contemporary. Mr. Rogers. Remember that TV show?
Mr. Rogers. Yeah.
Mr. Rogers. So one of his stories was about how, as a kid, I think if I remember it correctly, he says, "Mommy, mommy, why is there such evil in the world? And where's God? I don't see God. You tell me God's everywhere." And she said, "When something bad happens, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers, and then you'll find God." And
We love Mr. Rogers at
that's
Green
right.
Valley because he was an ordained Presbyterian pastor, ordained in
So,
Pittsburgh, amazing ministry.
and
And
didn't he
he
say it right? Didn't he say it right? I
Yes,
mean,
he did. And
everyone's
I hope I say
leaving
this
the
right, but
choir.
his real where he resonated with the Jewish theology of justice was tikkun olam,
Yeah.
that we that we make change.
And we repair, it literally means repair a broken.
Where is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So you look at 9/11 and all those people who went in when everyone was fleeing. You look at these fires and you see the firemen and women, the first responders going in. So it's a partial answer, but it's a big one, because if we look at our personal theology and we think, oh, these bad things are happening and God can do anything, or where is God? And we view it in terms of being punished, then it's very hard, I think, to reach out to God and find God's embrace and love. So here you've lost your home in LA, or maybe your loved one, had a heart attack, or whatever the tragedy might be, because we live long enough, bad stuff's going to happen.
Right.
Well, I think part of the answer has to be hope. And we can only have hope if we have faith. And we can only have faith if we believe in something greater than ourselves.
That's right.
And if we take that away by saying it doesn't exist, or God doesn't exist at that moment in time, then we're rudderless, and then we'll drown. So I always caution people. I said, you're entitled to, your pain, your hurt, but you're also trying to find your way back to life after this. And I'll tell you, your compass is a little shaky right now, and that's all normal. I mean, you're in very turbulent times with the wind and the wave, but eventually, when there's calm, I don't want you to feel lonely or alone. In that moment, listen and find that still quiet voice that speaks to you and what to do next, and the feeling that you're not alone. Again, easy words for a pastor, a rabbi, pastor to say, but I found it to be true and help. And that's how some people will rebuild. It fuels their resiliency.
As I often say to people, our faith doesn't make us immune from problem, from pain, from suffering. There's no way that I can read the scriptures that would say we're somehow, get out of jail, get out of suffering free card. We don't have it. But we do have a hope that can carry us. We may never get over the tragedies of life, but with God's help, we will get through them. And there's a difference between the world's perspective, getting over it, and getting through it. We have to close. We could go on and on. It's been a wonderful conversation. As always, Sandy, thank you.
Well, thank you, Adrian. It's good getting together and having a chance to kind of process this experience. And I thought it might be nice also if we encourage our listeners, if they have a topic or two that they would like for us to address, we invite audience suggestions. And you can find Reverend Dahl over at Green Valley Presbyterian. You can find me over at Congregation near Tamid. And on our websites are our emails, or you can call over and say, I got a suggestion for their podcast. And who knows, you may be the lucky ones, and we'll talk about that subject.
We'd love to hear it.
Thank you for sharing this time with Reverend Dahl and myself. And we wish everyone peace, and let matters of faith fill your life and touch your hearts. Take care.
Faith Matters features Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian Dahl from Green Valley Presbyterian Church, and is produced by Leslie Snadowsky. We hope you join us again for our next podcast episode of Faith Matters.